Hey fam, welcome back to this week's episode of the Dance Studio Scaled podcast. I'm going to start by saying this is not the episode that I had planned. I had planned a really strategic step-by-step, follow along, how to start building out your timetable type of episode. But after the week that I had, after the last couple of weeks, to be honest, I just really felt called to talk about this topic. And it is vulnerable, it is raw, it is pretty real. And I hope that in some way you get something out of this, particularly if it resonates with you, which chances are it will. And that's just based off a lot of conversations that I've been having really recently with some super incredible and experienced dance studio owners. And so if you're ready, if you're feeling, like this is a good time to sort of take in a pretty big episode, let's get ready to get started. Okay, the question that is being asked continually is it worth it? And the conversation that I'm about to have is really about the silent emotional toll of studio ownership that's happening right now. And it's been happening for a while, but I don't know, there just seems to be another wave of this questioning that's happening. And I wish I knew the answer as to why. I can speculate. However, instead of just questioning why, let's just talk about it. Let's talk through it. Because it's a big one. Is it worth it? And if you were to sit with that question for a second and be honest, like really honest, have you asked yourself this? Whether it's recently or ever, maybe quietly to yourself or on the drive home. It could possibly, if you're laying awake in bed at night, 11 p.m., or you're still answering emails, or people are calling you on a Sunday, like all these things, and you ask yourself, is it worth it? Because it's a question that I've had a lot lately, and it's been within conversations. And what struck me is that it's being asked more and more. And not just by newer studio owners who are still finding their feet, but experienced and capable, deeply committed people who have been doing this for 7, 10, 15, 20 years. People who love what they do. People who have built real businesses. And it's honestly, it's not a question of failure. It's not even a question of giving up. It's something more complex than that. It's that question that surfaces when you've given so much of yourself to something for so long that you're not quite sure where the studio ends and where you begin. And that's what this episode's about. So this particular week of the month, I've got a lot of my one-on-one calls with our mastermind girls, and this theme keeps coming up, and it's different iterations and it's in different ways with different conversations. But I'm also getting DMs from other studio owners who aren't currently in the mastermind, just through IG, and they're saying, yes, I'm feeling this. They're resonating with the social media posts that I'm putting out at the moment. And what was the crux of doing this episode was a conversation that I had with one particular member, and I deeply respect her. She's experienced, she's grounded, she's kind, she's just generally good at what she does. And in the middle of our conversation, she said to me, Jen, I was just done. I don't know why. I can't even tell you the cause of it. I think I just mentally checked out. And I knew what she meant. Not because I could explain it either, but because I've heard it before. I've felt it myself, that kind of exhaustion that doesn't have a clean trigger. It's not one big thing. It's not even 10 things. It's the accumulation of caring deeply for a really long time in an industry that asks a lot of you emotionally and doesn't always give a lot back. And she said, like, everything took a hit, and for her, it really came out of nowhere. She said everything took a hit, her social media, which she loves doing, even jumping on our group calls that we have each month as well. She said, I can't explain it. It was just a lot. And she said, now I'm back and I'm feeling better, which is good. And she is back. and she's clear and she's focused and making some of the most honest business decisions that I've seen her make. But that conversation, of course, stayed with me because I know she's not the only one. And I say all of this knowing that I'm not immune to this either. And if you've listened to any of the past couple of episodes, you know that I've been going through like my own version of this. I talked about how I stopped, like just generally stopped what I was doing and questioned everything, the direction I was taking the business, the decisions I was making, whether the things I was building were still the things I actually wanted to be building. And the thing that was hardest to sit with all of this was the resistance, that feeling of pushing against something and not understanding why it felt so hard. Until I realized it was because the direction I was heading didn't align with who I am now and what I actually want. It wasn't wrong for someone, it just wasn't right for me at this point in my life. And that kind of questioning is uncomfortable. So it's especially uncomfortable when you're someone who normally has a really clear sense of direction, when you pride yourself on knowing where you're going. But I think it's also necessary. And I think it's happening for many of us right now at an industry level, not just as an individual. Okay, so one of the most meaningful things anyone's ever said to me, and I still think about it too, like regularly, and they described me as fiercely loyal, and it was said as a compliment, and it landed as one of the most, in my opinion, accurate things anyone's ever said about me, because it's true. I am fiercely loyal and it's in my bones, and it runs through every relationship I have. My family, my friendships, the studio owners that I work with in the mastermind, like the way I show up in business. Once I'm in, and I won't do things half-assed. I don't leave when it gets hard. Essentially you get all of me, the good, the bad, the ugly, right? And integrity is the same for me. It's not a value that I choose from a list. It is simply how I'm wired. The alignment between what I believe and how I act, that's not negotiable for me, and it never has been, which is why I want to talk about what happens when that gets challenged. And maybe you resonate with that because you might have those values. You might see yourself as a fiercely loyal person, or, integrity being an important value. I think the deepest emotional toll of studio ownership, and, people don't really name it. It's not always about the financial pressure. It's not even the operational exhaustion. It's what happens when someone questions your integrity, when your loyalty is tested in a way that feels unfair, when you've built something on a foundation of genuine care and someone looks at it and tells you it's not good enough, or it's worse, or it should be done a different way. That's when the question, is it worth it, becomes real and hits hard. Now, the studio owner that I was speaking about, she also told me about a parent confrontation that she said that she had, and it was like really sitting uncomfortably with her. A parent had told her that she was creating a toxic environment. Now, I want you to think about what it feels like to hear that, and maybe you've heard that or something similar in your career. When you have given years to these families, when you know every child's name, you know their history, you know their struggles, their wins, when you've shown up season after season with full commitment to their kids, and a lot of times like neglecting your own, and someone then sits across from you and tells you that your environment's toxic. Now, she told me that she handled it, and she was really proud how she handled it. She was calm, she was direct, and just said to this mum, you need to figure out if your child is unhappy because we're unhappy. And if we're not going to come to a conclusion, we've got to do what's best for each other. And I loved that response. And, she's come so far from when we first started working together to be able to respond that way. But this is also a woman who knows who she is now, this particular studio owner. Like, that's someone operating from a place of clear integrity, even under enormous pressure. But knowing who you are doesn't make it not hurt, right? It still knocks your confidence. Even the most experienced and the most competent amongst us, and she is both of those things, we still feel that wobble when our character's questioned. And then she said something that I thought was one of the most powerful things that I've heard in a long time. She spoke about her team. And, again, this is a great value for her. She talked about teachers who she has had for 16 years, 12 years, 10 years. And she said parents were starting to question her team. And she turned and she said, I will stick with them. Because those four words told me everything about her as a leader. And it's not just loyalty, that's integrity in action. Under pressure, when it would be easier to make a different call. And then after all of this, there's the children, right? Our students. You become emotionally invested in these kids, and we can't help it. We watch them grow. A lot of them are from toddlers in nappies through to the time that they leave school. That whole lifetime that you've been a part of, you see them find confidence that they didn't have before. You carry their stories with you. And anyone who tells you not to get emotionally invested has probably never taught a 4-year-old their first plie and then watched a teenager finally nail something that they've been working on for 2 years. And the studio owner said, I'm trying to learn to not be emotionally invested. But you just are when there's kids involved. And then she said about a little girl who had been with her since she was 3 years old and was now 14, and then just left. And there was no phone call, there was no message. She heard about it through the grapevine, and that hurts, right? That genuinely hurts, even when we don't want it to. And I don't think people outside this industry understand what that actually feels like, because that's not a customer churning problem. That's not a business metric. That is a child you have cared for, you have watched, you've probably worried about at times, and then they just go without a word, and you're left sitting with a loss that has no name or no professional framework, absolutely nowhere to put it, right? And then you have to go and teach your next class, like you're just moving on. And then the teenagers, again, another conversation that I've had a fair bit is the behavior of teenagers, the disrespect, like the whispering in the corner. And you as a grown woman, you can tell yourself they're probably not even talking about me, but it looks like it. And it makes you feel uncomfortable, and your confidence takes another hit, and you wonder, what's happening to me, right? I'm good at this. I know I'm good at this. Why does it feel so hard? And I keep coming back to, it's because you care. That's why. And the caring just doesn't switch off just because something hurts. So when you find yourself asking, is it worth it? I want to be honest about what that question actually sounds like, because I think we tend to soften it when we say it out loud. So it sounds like, is it worth it when a child you've watched grow from the age of 3 just disappears and you hear about it from someone else? Is it worth it when a parent sits across you and questions your character and part of you absorbs it even when you know it isn't true? Is it worth it when you're given everything you have to a year or to a season or to a concert and you mentally check out and you can't even tell people why because you can't even explain it to yourself? Is it worth it when the teenagers are whispering and your confidence takes a hit and you hate that it does because you are experienced and capable and know better, and yet it still lands? Is it worth it when the thing that you believe in deeply doesn't make sense on a spreadsheet, when the numbers don't add up? Is it worth it when your integrity is questioned by the very people you've given so much to? Those are the real versions of the question. And I think naming them matters, because when we keep the question vague, we can't actually answer it. But when we name it, we name what we're really asking, that's when we're going to get somewhere. So in wrapping up this episode, I'm not going to wrap up with a list of reasons why it's all worth it. Because I think, and hopefully, you already know what your reasons are. They're in the studio when a child does something that they couldn't do 6 months ago. They're in the team that's been by your side for a decade and a half. They're in the moments of the genuine connections that you have with families who trust you with the most important things in their world. And a lot of it doesn't even have to do with dance. You know why you do this? What I want you to say instead is this. The exhaustion you're feeling right now isn't weakness. It's not a sign that you should leave. It's a sign that you care deeply, that you lead with integrity, and that you're doing one of the most emotionally demanding jobs there is in a landscape that has shifted significantly and hasn't stopped shifting. The studio owner that I spoke to this week is making some of her clearest decisions that she's ever made. She's letting go of things that no longer fit. Not in defeat, but with enormous clarity. And this isn't easy. Let me say, this is not easy for her. And the last part when she was telling me, she said, I know I've got to do this. And I think I've just got to be okay with that. That's what she said to me. I'm like, yeah, we do. Because it's not about giving up. That's just integrity in action. That's knowing who you are and building a business around it, even when it costs you. And that, I think, is the answer. Not to the spreadsheet, not to the parent confrontation, but to the deeper question underneath it all. You do this because you are someone who leads with loyalty and integrity, and you genuinely care. And the fact that it sometimes costs you something, that it sometimes leaves you depleted or questioning or quietly done for a week, that's not a flaw in you. That's, I believe, is the price of doing something properly. All right, fam, I'm going to leave it there. Thank you so much for listening. I know it was a bit deep, a little bit vulnerable, a little bit raw, but I was feeling called just to talk about this. So maybe, hopefully this has helped you in some way, even if it's small. If it's resonated for you, please let me know. Send me a message on Instagram. I'd love to know how you're feeling in navigating this at the moment. Or maybe you know someone, maybe you've got a studio and a friend or a business bestie who might need to hear this right now. Just let them know. Now, if you haven't listened to the recent podcast where I've been talking about my own questioning and resistance, go back and have a listen because they're part of the same conversation. All right, my friends, thank you so much for being here, and I will see you next week.